My name is Sarah Martinez, and I'm 28 years old. Right now, I'm sitting in my car after my sister's wedding, and my hands are still shaking from what just occurred. I never imagined my mother's words at Madison's wedding would change my life forever. The humiliation I felt when she told me I only deserved dry bread in front of everyone was devastating. But what I did next silenced all 200 guests. The looks on their faces, the gasps, and even my sister's disbelief were shocking. Before I tell you about that life-changing night, let me know where you're watching from, and don't forget to hit that like button if you've ever felt undervalued by your own family. Now let me take you back to the evening that changed everything. Growing up as the older sister in the Martinez family, I quickly learned that love wasn't distributed equally. I'm Sarah, the responsible, practical daughter who never quite measured up to my younger sister, Madison's sparkle. Madison is 25, 3 years younger, but she's always been the golden child in my mother Patricia's eyes. My mother, Patricia Martinez, is 52 and has perfected the art of subtle favoritism over the decades. She never explicitly said she loved Madison more, but her actions spoke volumes. When we started high school, Madison was enrolled in the prestigious St. Catherine's Academy, while I attended the local public school because, as my mother explained, the family budget could only afford one private education. The comparisons began early and never stopped. Madison inherited our grandmother's delicate features and petite frame, while I got my father's broader shoulders and what my mother diplomatically called a more sturdy build. Madison's hair fell in perfect waves effortlessly, while mine required an arsenal of products to look presentable. These weren't just observations. They were daily reminders of who was the prettier daughter. My father, Robert, God bless him, tried to stay neutral but mostly remained silent. He's the type of man who believes keeping the peace is more important than keeping score, so he would retreat to his workshop whenever the tension got too thick. By adulthood, the pattern was set in stone. When Madison decided to open her nail salon, our parents co-signed a loan and provided the down payment. When I wanted to pursue additional accounting certifications, I was told it was my own responsibility since I already had a steady job. I currently work as a staff accountant at Henderson Associates, a mid-sized firm downtown. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills and provides the stability I've always craved. My coworkers respect my attention to detail, and my supervisor recently hinted at a promotion. But in my mother's eyes, my steady paycheck and reliable nature paled in comparison to Madison's entrepreneurial spirit and her Instagram-worthy nail art. The wedding planning process showed just how deep this favoritism ran. My mother spent months researching venues, insisting that only the Marriott's grand ballroom would do. The budget ballooned to $50,000, money my parents had been saving for years. Every detail had to be perfect for Madison. My role was relegated to the background. While Madison's college friends were bridesmaids, I was given the practical tasks: coordinating with vendors, managing the gift table, and handling the small crises. When I suggested giving a speech as maid of honor, my mother quickly shot down the idea, implying I might ramble or say something inappropriate. The maid of honor duties went to Madison's best friend, Jessica, while I was given the title of family coordinator, which sounded important but was basically unpaid wedding staff. Despite all of this, I held on to hope that Madison's wedding might be different. Maybe seeing both her daughters on such an important day would remind my mother that she had 2 children who loved her. Maybe the joy of the occasion would soften her heart and help her see that I had value too. The wedding was set for a Saturday evening in late September. The guest list included 200 people, mostly Madison's friends and extended family. The venue was everything my mother had dreamed of, with crystal chandeliers, white roses, and a dance floor that would make any bride feel like a princess. As the wedding approached, I was genuinely excited for Madison. Despite everything, I loved my sister and wanted her to have the perfect day. Her fiancé, Kevin, seemed like a good man, a software engineer with a steady job and a kind disposition. He treated Madison well and genuinely adored her. I spent weeks shopping for the perfect dress, settling on a navy blue cocktail dress that cost me $200, a significant portion of my monthly budget. I wanted to look elegant and appropriate, to blend in seamlessly and not draw attention to myself for the wrong reasons. The more I thought about it, the more I convinced myself that this wedding could be a fresh start for our family relationships. Maybe after seeing Madison settled and happy, my mother would have room in her heart to appreciate her other daughter too. The morning of Madison's wedding arrived with the crisp promise of autumn. I woke up at 5 a.m., 3 hours before my alarm, my stomach churning with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. This was going to be a big day for our family, and despite all the complicated history, I was determined to make it beautiful for my sister. I had planned to do my own hair and makeup, having watched countless YouTube tutorials. My bathroom counter looked like a makeup store had exploded on it, with foundation shades I'd tested, eyeshadow palettes I'd researched, and hair tools I'd borrowed. Meanwhile, Madison had a full glam squad arriving at the hotel at 8 a.m. My mother had hired a professional hairstylist, a makeup artist, and even a photographer to capture every moment of Madison's transformation. The contrast wasn't lost on me, but I pushed down any feelings of resentment. This was Madison's day. I arrived at the family home around 10 a.m. to help with final preparations. The house buzzed with activity as my aunts arranged flowers and my cousins set up decorations. My mother was in full mother-of-the-bride mode, with her hair in curlers and a silk robe that read Madison's mom in gold script. When she saw me, she looked me up and down with a critical eye. "Well, you look acceptable," she said, which I suppose was better than criticism. "Your hair actually turned out decent. Just try not to draw attention to yourself today, okay? This is Madison's moment to shine." I nodded and smiled, biting back the response that formed in my throat. I busied myself with small tasks, folding programs and arranging the emergency kit I'd prepared with safety pins, stain remover and pain relievers. When Madison emerged from her room in full bridal glory, the entire house seemed to pause. She looked absolutely stunning in her $3,000 gown, her skin glowing from months of professional facials, her hair in an elaborate updo that had taken 2 hours to perfect. "Oh, my baby," my mother gasped, pressing her hands to her chest. "You look like an absolute princess, like something out of a fairy tale. I can't believe my little girl is getting married." Tears streamed down my mother's face as she fussed over Madison's dress. The photographer captured every moment of this emotional scene, and I found myself stepping back to stay out of the frame. We arrived at the church 30 minutes before the ceremony. The afternoon sun streamed through the stained glass windows, casting colorful patterns across the pews. The church was already half full. I noticed that the first 2 rows on the bride's side were reserved for immediate family, but when the ushers guided me to my seat, I was placed in the 3rd row. The 2nd row was for Madison's bridesmaids and their dates. When I asked about this, my mother explained that the traditional seating arrangement put the bridal party closest to the altar. During the ceremony, I watched my sister pledge her love to Kevin with genuine happiness in my heart. They looked perfect together, and Kevin's vows brought tears to my eyes. This was what love should look like: mutual respect, genuine affection, and partnership. My mother sobbed throughout the entire ceremony, dabbing her eyes with a special handkerchief she'd embroidered. She had spent weeks talking about how proud she was of Madison, how perfectly everything had turned out, and how this was the happiest day of her life. After the ceremony, we moved to the Marriott for the reception. The ballroom had been transformed into a winter wonderland with white flowers, silver accents, and twinkling lights. It was genuinely beautiful, and I felt proud that our family had created such a magical setting for Madison and Kevin. The cocktail hour buzzed with conversation as guests admired the venue and caught up with relatives. I mingled politely, taking photos and making small talk with Madison's college friends. When it was time for dinner, I found I had been assigned to table 8, near the back of the room and far from the family tables. My table companions were Kevin's co-workers and their spouses. Nice people but strangers to me. The head table, of course, seated Madison, Kevin, the wedding party, and both sets of parents. As I looked around the room, I told myself that everything was going as it should. This was Madison's night, and she deserved to be the center of attention. Table 8 turned out to be more enjoyable than I'd expected. Kevin's colleagues were warm and welcoming, asking genuine questions about my work and sharing stories about corporate life. It was refreshing to talk to people who didn't know our family history and treated me as just another wedding guest. "So, what do you do for work?" asked Jennifer, a project manager at Kevin's tech company. She seemed genuinely interested. "I work for Henderson Associates," I replied. "I handle accounts receivable and help small businesses manage their books. It's not the most exciting work, but I find it satisfying to help people understand their finances." "That's so important," chimed in her husband Michael. "We've been looking for someone to help us organize our taxes. Do you ever do freelance work?" Before I could answer, I heard the distinctive sound of my mother's voice approaching our table. Patricia was making her rounds, checking on guests. "Oh, there's my other daughter," she announced to the table, her tone making me cringe. "Sarah's always been the practical one in the family." The table smiled politely, and Jennifer continued. "We were just saying how valuable accounting skills are. Sarah was telling us about her work." My mother's expression tightened slightly, a look I had learned to recognize. "Yes, well, Sarah has always been good with numbers, very methodical, very reliable." He paused. "Not like Madison, of course. Madison has real business instincts, natural entrepreneurial flair." The table fell silent. I tried to change the subject. "Madison's salon is doing really well. She's built up quite a client base." "Oh yes," my mother continued, warming to her favorite subject. "Madison's only 25 and she already owns her own business. She has such vision, such creativity. Her Instagram has over 10,000 followers, She's even featured in local magazines." Michael nodded politely. "That's impressive. But steady work like Sarah's is really valuable too. Not everyone can be an entrepreneur." My mother's laugh had an edge to it. "Well, that's certainly true. Sarah's always been more of a follower than a leader. Some people are meant for steady behind-the-scenes work, and some people are meant to shine." I felt my cheeks burning. "Both types of work are important, Mom. The economy needs people in all different roles." "Of course, dear," she replied, patting my shoulder in a condescending way. "You found your niche. It's just that Madison has such ambition, such drive. At 25, she's already accomplished so much more than most people do by 30. The implication was clear. I, at 28, had accomplished far less than my younger sister. Jennifer and Michael exchanged uncomfortable glances. "Actually," Jennifer said, trying to rescue the situation, "I think what Sarah does sounds really challenging. Managing books for multiple businesses requires a lot of skill and attention to detail." My mother waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, it's fine work for someone who likes routine. Sarah's always preferred the safety of a steady paycheck to the excitement of building something from scratch. She's not a risk-taker like Madison." The words stung because there was enough truth in them to hurt. I had chosen security over uncertainty. But hearing my life choices dismissed so casually in front of strangers was humiliating. "Madison's salon grossed 6 figures in its first year," my mother continued, oblivious to the discomfort she was causing. "She's already looking at opening a second location. That's the difference between having vision and just having a job." I excused myself, claiming I needed to use the restroom. I really needed a moment to compose myself before I said something I'd regret. As I walked away, I could hear her continuing to praise Madison. In the bathroom, I stared at myself in the mirror and tried to remember why I was here. This was Madison's wedding day. I was here to celebrate her happiness, not to compete for my mother's approval. I could get through the rest of the evening with grace and dignity. When I returned, my mother had moved on. The conversation had shifted to safer topics, but I could feel the sympathetic glances from my tablemates. The damage was done, but I tried to salvage the evening by focusing on the positive. The food was excellent, the music was lovely, and seeing Madison so happy made all the awkwardness worthwhile. The dinner concluded with the usual wedding traditions. Madison and Kevin had their first dance to At Last by Etta James, looking completely in love. My father danced with Madison next, tears in his eyes as he spun his youngest daughter around the dance floor. I watched from my table, genuinely moved by the tender moments. Despite all the family complications, these were the moments that mattered. After the dances, it was time for the cake cutting. The cake was a 3-tiered masterpiece from Bella's bakery that cost nearly $800. The photographer gathered the crowd, and Madison and Kevin posed with a silver cake knife, laughing as they cut into the bottom tier. After the photos, Madison began serving cake to the most important guests. I stood with the other guests, patiently waiting for my turn, expecting to be among the first. But she moved through the crowd, serving aunts, uncles, and close friends. I told myself she was probably saving family for last, but as the minutes ticked by, I watched her serve nearly 20 people, never making eye contact with me. Rather than continue waiting, I decided to approach the cake table myself. I had just picked up the cake server when I heard my mother's voice behind me. "Sarah, what are you doing?" she asked sharply. "I was just going to cut myself a piece of cake, Mom. Madison seems busy." My mother's expression was stern, almost scandalized. "That cake cost $800, Sarah. It's made with imported Belgian chocolate and organic vanilla from Madagascar." I was confused by her reaction. "I know it's beautiful, Mom. I just wanted to taste a small piece." "It's a wedding cake," she replied, moving to block my access. "Isn't it meant to be shared with the right people?" "Yes," she replied. "Madison specifically requested this cake from Bella's bakery. Do you have any idea how exclusive that place is?" Other guests were beginning to notice. I tried to keep my voice low. "I understand it's special, Mom. I'm not trying to take more than my share. I just thought it would be nice to taste it." My mother looked me up and down, taking in my off-the-rack dress and shoes. When she spoke again, her voice carried a coldness that made my blood freeze. "Honey, with your simple lifestyle and basic tastes, you wouldn't even be able to appreciate something this sophisticated. This cake is for people who understand quality, who can recognize fine ingredients and artisanal craftsmanship." I felt like I'd been slapped. Conversations around us quieted. "Mom, what are you trying to say?" "Yes." She sighed as if explaining something to a child. "Sarah, you've always been perfectly content with simple, ordinary things. You shop at Target. You drive a used car. You live in that little apartment. There's nothing wrong with that, but it means you're not equipped to appreciate luxury when you see it." My hands were shaking, but I tried to diffuse the situation one last time. "I understand the cake is expensive. I'm not asking for a huge piece. I just wanted to participate." That's when my mother delivered the words that would change everything. "Sarah," she said, loud enough for at least 20 people to hear, "someone with your simple tastes and modest means only deserves dry bread. This cake is for people who have earned the right to enjoy the finer things in life." The words hit me like a physical blow. "You only deserve dry bread," said by my own mother at my sister's wedding. The conversations around us stopped completely. I could feel people staring. Madison, from across the room, looked over, confused. Kevin's parents were staring in shock. My mother wasn't finished. "I'm not trying to be cruel, Sarah. I'm just being realistic. You've chosen a life of simplicity. There's honor in that. But it also means that certain experiences aren't really meant for you." I stood there, trembling, unable to form words. In that moment, 28 years of subtle put-downs and constant comparisons crystallized into this one devastating sentence. The silence that followed felt eternal. I stood there, cake server still in hand, as 200 wedding guests processed what they had just witnessed. For 28 years, I had accepted my role as the lesser daughter, the one who didn't quite measure up. I had internalized every comparison, every dismissal, every casual cruelty disguised as an honest assessment. But standing there, surrounded by witnesses to my mother's ultimate judgment of my worth, something inside me finally snapped. I carefully set down the cake server. The trembling had stopped, replaced by a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't going to run to the bathroom to cry. I wasn't going to quietly retreat to my table. I wasn't going to smile and accept this treatment one more time. Instead, I walked purposefully toward the small stage where the DJ had set up his equipment. The band was on a break, and the microphone sat unused. I had never given a speech in my life, never sought the spotlight. But tonight was going to be different. I stepped up onto the platform and reached for the microphone. The feedback squeal got everyone's attention. Conversations stopped, heads turned, and suddenly 200 people were looking at me. "Excuse me, everyone," I said, my voice carrying clearly. "I'd like to say a few words." I could see Madison near the cake table, her face a mixture of confusion and concern. Kevin stood beside her, his hand on her waist. My parents stood frozen, my father's face pale and my mother's expression shifting to horror as she realized what was happening. "My name is Sarah Martinez," I continued, "and I'm Madison's older sister. I wasn't asked to give a speech tonight, but I think it's time I finally spoke up." The room was completely silent now. I want to start by saying how much I love my sister Madison. Growing up with her has been one of the greatest joys of my life. I've watched her grow from a curious little girl into the beautiful, successful woman you see today. Madison, you deserve all the happiness in the world. Kevin, you're getting an incredible wife. Madison's eyes filled with tears and she mouthed, "Thank you." Some of the tension eased. This was starting like a traditional speech. "But tonight," I continued, "I learned something about family that broke my heart. I learned that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally are the ones who place the harshest conditions on that love." The atmosphere shifted again. People began to exchange glances, sensing this was heading somewhere unexpected. My mother took a step forward, but my father caught her arm. "A few minutes ago, someone who should love me more than anyone else in this world told me that I only deserve dry bread. She said this because I'm not fancy enough, not successful enough, not worthy enough to share in the same simple pleasures as everyone else." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Several people looked directly at my mother, who had gone completely white. Madison covered her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. "You know what?" I said, my voice growing stronger. "Maybe she's right. Maybe I do only deserve dry bread." The confusion on people's faces was palpable. Because dry bread represents something that this family has forgotten how to value. Dry bread is honest. It's real. It's sustenance without pretense. It doesn't try to be something it's not, and it doesn't apologize for being simple. I paused, looking out over the crowd. Dry bread is authentic, and apparently authenticity isn't valued much in this family. But you know what? I'd rather be genuine dry bread than fake fancy cake any day of the week. Some people began to nod. And since we're talking about authenticity, I think it's time I shared something authentic with all of you tonight. I pulled a folded envelope from my purse, a surprise I had been waiting for the right moment to share. 6 months ago, I started my own bookkeeping and financial consulting business. I didn't tell my family because I wanted to make sure it was successful first. The crowd was riveted. Last month, I signed contracts with 3 major clients. My little business, the one I've been running from my simple apartment, is now on track to gross $200,000 in its first year. The gasps were audible. My mother looked like she might faint. "But that's not all," I continued. "Yesterday, I closed on my first house. Not a condo, not a rental, but an actual 3-bedroom house with a yard and a 2-car garage. I paid 20% down, and my mortgage payment is less than what most people pay in rent." Kevin's father, a successful businessman, began to smile. "And this morning before this wedding, I received a call from Patterson Industries. They want to hire me as their full-time financial consultant. The salary they offered is more than double what I make at my current job." The room was buzzing with whispered conversations. I could see people looking at me with new interest, with a respect I'd never received from my own family. I kept all of this quiet because I wanted to surprise my family. I thought maybe if I achieved enough success, if I proved myself worthy enough, I might finally earn the love and respect I've been seeking my whole life. My voice caught, but I pushed through. But tonight I realized something important. I don't need to earn anyone's love or respect. I certainly don't need to prove my worth to people who have already decided I'm only worth dry bread. I looked directly at my mother. Madison, I love you more than you'll ever know, and I wish you and Kevin a lifetime of happiness. You deserve every beautiful thing this world has to offer. Madison was crying now. Kevin had his arm around her, and both were staring at me with amazement and pride. But I won't stay in a place where my worth is constantly questioned, where my accomplishments are dismissed, and where I'm told I don't deserve the same basic kindness extended to everyone else. I set the microphone back on its stand and stepped down. The room erupted in applause, led by my Aunt Linda. Kevin's parents joined in, as did most of the guests. The sound was overwhelming, a wave of validation I'd never experienced before. People were standing, giving me a standing ovation that went on for what felt like several minutes. The immediate aftermath of my speech was surreal. As the applause died down, I found myself surrounded by people I barely knew. Kevin's uncle, a CEO, pushed through the crowd. "Sarah," he said, extending his business card. I had no idea Kevin's new sister-in-law was such an accomplished businesswoman. "We've been looking for someone exactly like you. Would you be interested in discussing a consulting opportunity?" Before I could respond, Jennifer from my dinner table appeared. "Sarah, after what we witnessed, I have to say I'm even more impressed by your professionalism. My husband and I would love to hire you to organize our finances. Could we set up a meeting next week?" The business cards and offers kept coming. Kevin's college roommate wanted help with his startup. One of Madison's bridesmaids' mothers owned a chain of boutiques and needed a financial consultant. Even my distant relatives were approaching me with newfound respect. But the person I most wanted to see was my sister. Madison had been standing near the cake table, and now she was making her way through the crowd. When she reached me, she didn't say a word. She just threw her arms around me and held me tight, not caring if she wrinkled her expensive gown or smudged her makeup. "Sarah," she whispered in my ear.